Welcome, everyone. Today we're exploring a concept that bridges personal leadership development with neuroscience and trauma-informed care. We'll discuss introspective trauma-informed leadership, which asks us to turn the trauma-informed lens inward as leaders. We'll examine how our own histories shape our leadership patterns and explore whether neuroscience offers new pathways for transformation. As nonprofit human services leaders, we've become skilled at implementing trauma-informed approaches throughout our organization. We train our staff, we design our programs, and we create safe spaces for our clients. But there's a critical gap. We rarely turn that same lens towards ourselves. Introspective trauma-informed leadership fills this gap by asking leaders to examine how their own experiences with adversity shape their leadership patterns, decisions, and relationships. The research that sparked this framework studied executive leaders in nonprofit human services. These were experienced professionals who understood trauma-informed care in their work with clients. Yet, when researchers asked about the connection between their own adverse childhood experiences and their leadership styles, it was a revelation. The connection was already there, already shaping their decisions and behaviors, but operating below the surface of conscious awareness. Once invited to explore it, leaders experienced profound insights about their own patterns. To understand introspective trauma-informed leadership, we need to understand what trauma does to the brain. Trauma creates lasting structural and functional changes, particularly in two areas. The amygdala, our threat detection center, becomes hyperactive. It's constantly scanning for danger, even when we're safe. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which normally helps us rationally assess situations and regulate our own responses, can become compromised. This means our ability to accurately evaluate whether something is actually threatening becomes impaired. This is where we introduce a potentially transformative reframing. What if trauma triggers in leadership contexts aren't accurate readings of current danger, but rather neurological misfires? Outdated alarm systems responding to old threats that no longer exist. This idea draws inspiration from pain reprocessing therapy, which has shown remarkable success in treating chronic pain. That approach works by helping the brain recognize that pain signals are false alarms, not indicators of actual tissue damage. The brain then creates new neural pathways, and the pain diminishes or disappears. Could a similar process work for trauma responses, specifically in leadership contexts? It's a compelling question worth exploring. Imagine an executive director who experiences overwhelming anxiety every time they present to their board of directors. Their heart races, they feel scrutinized, they second guess every word. When we trace this back, we discover childhood experiences of harsh, unpredictable criticism from authority figures. Traditional approaches might teach breathing exercises or positive self-talk, coping strategies to manage the anxiety. But what if we could go deeper? What if we could help this leader's brain recognize that board meetings aren't actually dangerous? That the anxiety is a neurological misfire based on old experiences, not current reality. This is the promise of the reprocessing approach within introspective trauma-informed leadership. The reprocessing framework involves 4 interconnected steps. First, recognition. We must develop the capacity to identify triggers as they're happening to catch ourselves in the moment. Second, reframing. We consciously tell ourselves and our brains that this is an outdated alarm system and not a real threat. This isn't denial, it's an accurate assessment. Third, neuroplasticity activation. Through repeated practice of this reframing, we're literally creating new neural pathways, giving our brains alternative routes to travel. Finally, integration. Over time, the prefrontal cortex, our rational, regulating brain, learns to override the amygdala's false alarms. This isn't a one-time process. It's a practice that deepens over time. We need to approach this work with intellectual humility and rigor. There are critical questions we still need to answer. First, scientific validity. While the parallel to pain reprocessing is compelling, trauma and pain may operate through fundamentally different mechanisms. We need rigorous research to validate whether this approach actually works for trauma triggers. Second, individual variability. Not everyone's trauma will respond to this approach. Complex, multi-layered trauma, particularly involving ongoing threats or severe developmental disruption, may require entirely different interventions. Third, professional boundaries. Introspective trauma-informed leadership is a leadership development framework, not therapy. I need to be crystal clear about where the line is and ensure that people get the proper support systems they need. We don't often acknowledge that the nonprofit sector disproportionately attracts leaders who have lived experience of adversity, trauma, and marginalization. This isn't coincidental. Often, it's precisely these experiences that ignite the passion for social justice, the drive to prevent others from suffering similarly, and the deep empathy that fuels this work. Introspective trauma-informed leadership doesn't ask leaders to overcome or eliminate their histories. Instead, it suggests that we might intentionally harness these experiences as leadership strengths while simultaneously addressing the ways they may challenge us. We can transform wounds into wisdom, triggers into tools for understanding, and pain into purpose. This is the radical reframing at the heart of this approach. Whether or not we choose to engage with introspective trauma-informed leadership, our personal histories are already shaping our leadership. The research makes this clear. Leaders' adverse childhood experiences are already influencing how they make decisions, how they build relationships, how they respond to stress, and how they lead. This is happening whether we acknowledge it or not. So the question isn't whether this connection exists. It does. The question is whether we'll engage with it consciously and intentionally with proper safety measures and professional support, with cultural humility, and with research rigor. That's the choice before us. This is your invitation to further this inquiry. The science behind introspective trauma-informed leadership is still emerging, but the potential implications are significant, particularly for nonprofit leaders who carry the dual weight of personal history and enormous organizational responsibility. Rather than asking leaders to cope with their triggers or overcome their histories, this approach offers the possibility of transformation and integration. But we need your help. We need continued research, thoughtful implementation in real-world settings, rigorous evaluation, and shared learning across the sector. This work requires collaboration, humility, and commitment to evidence-based practice. I'll leave you with some reflective questions for your own leadership journey. How might your own history be shaping your leadership patterns in ways you haven't fully recognized? What triggers do you experience regularly that might actually be false alarms or outdated responses to threats that no longer exist? What support systems would you need to explore this connection safely and productively? And how might your lived experience of adversity be simultaneously a challenge to navigate and a profound source of strength and wisdom? I encourage you to sit with these questions, but please remember, this exploration should not be done in isolation. It requires appropriate professional support, whether that's a qualified therapist, an informed executive coach, or both. If you're considering implementing introspective trauma-informed leadership in your organization or leadership practice, please start by building the proper infrastructure. Seek qualified mental health professionals with trauma specialization, work with executive coaches who have training in trauma-informed approaches, build organizational system supports before you begin, and always prioritize safety and cultural humility. This is complex, important work that deserves to be done right. Thank you for your attention and your openness to this topic. I look forward to continuing this conversation and learning together as we explore what this approach might offer to nonprofit leadership. Please comment, subscribe, and connect so we can work together to integrate introspective trauma-informed leadership.